I are going to have an informal conversation, just like we would on a fireside chat. So if there's any questions throughout our conversations that you'd like to ask us, then please do pop them in the Q&A box, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. And we'll make sure there's plenty of opportunities for questions at the end. We've also got some free resources for you, because we like a freebie, as we all do. So if you scan that QR code on there, you'll get access to a download based on what we're talking about today, and some resources that we have enjoyed ourselves. So books, a podcast, and videos that will help you enhance your leadership personalities and also behaviors, and also how you work with other leaders. As Brenton and Christina quite kindly shared, we've also written a book that you can access, and please do buy your own copy and then borrow it out.
I was going to say the same thing. Because you know what? I refer to it all the time. I look at it, I'm doing a project for a client, and I go, what did we say?
I know. And I end up Googling quotes and find our quotes on there, which is really bizarre. So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about our book and leadership and why it's such an important part. And then some of you may not be aware, but Priya and I also host a podcast. We're in season 4, and we interview incredible leaders in workplaces. So in this season, we've interviewed people from Pixar, from Kellogg's, PepsiCo, yes. Incredible leaders who are doing fantastic things. Sodexo,
yep.
The Obama Foundation, that was an incredible conversation. So please check it out. You can scan that code. You can just search A Leader Like Me podcast, and it'll pop up on your favorite podcasting platform. So the first area we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about 5 areas of leadership that we think we believe will help you become better leaders and help you also raise visibility of the leaders that you're working with.
Absolutely. And that building trust piece has been a big part of the book as well. One of the things you're going to share, Advita, is we have a whole chapter on trust.
Yeah. And we dedicated a whole chapter on trust because out of all the work we do with the organizations that we support, one of the pitfalls is lack of trust. So what does trust actually mean? And one of the equations that I refer to frequently, and it's also in the book, is the trust equation, the trustworthiness equation. And it's been created by a group of theorists and researchers called the trusted advisors. And what they say as a trusted advisor is that there are 3 key attributes to help you build trust. Credibility is one of them. And it's something that many people know, to be trusted, you're going to be credible. But alongside credibility, there's also reliability. So how reliable are you as a leader? And how reliable are you when it comes to working with other leaders within your profession? And then the third area is relationship building, or intimacy, as they call it. So how good are you at building relationships? And how trusted are you when it comes to that? Can people trust you with the conversations that they have with you? Do they trust you that you're going to listen properly to them? Do they trust you that you're going to take action based on what they've said? So it leans into that reliability attribute. And then all 3 of those attributes are divided over self-orientation. And self-orientation is how self-aware you are about what's happening around you, in terms of, are you doing it for purely selfish reasons in terms of building trust, or are you doing it for the greater good? And trust is something that we don't tend to spend a lot of time uncovering or discovering, in terms of how do people see us as trusted leaders, and how do we trust other people, and most importantly, why do we trust them?
And the one thing that, the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is one of the pieces of research that I read on an annual basis, has been showing over time that people, your people, the people who work for the organizations that you consult with or you work with, have more trust in their leaders than they do in the media right now, in government, in NGOs, and the big bad CEOs, right? So they don't necessarily trust the Elon Musks and the Zuckerbergs of the world, but they do trust their leaders, their supervisors, and the CEOs of their immediate organizations. And I see that as such a big opportunity for communication.
Yeah. And it's also really interesting to look at the trust gap. So if you are having challenges in your organization in terms of people contributing, following instructions, listening to what leaders are saying, often there's a trust gap, the say-do gap. And we talk about that a lot in internal communications and communications generally, about the say-do gap. You know, we often have values plastered on the wall that nobody really follows, really, in terms of behaviors. We talk a lot about inclusion, but what does that actually mean? And do people trust you when you write something or say something? Do they believe that you're going to follow through with what you're saying? So it's a really critical part of leadership and line management. And as Priya said, you know, the trust barometer says that the most trusted individuals right now in the world of business are the people that you work with, your leaders that you report into. And people are looking at you for that trusted guidance. And we say, you know, like I said, we've got a whole chapter dedicated to it. Say, without trust, you can't cultivate inclusive cultures. And trust is when we have confidence that our expectations someone will meet the desired outcome. And even though our book is talking about inclusive cultures, it's really talking about leadership and how are we leading in the modern workplace, and what does that look like? So while we're going through our fireside chat, it'll be great for you to consider, what does it mean to be a leader for you? What does leadership look like for you? And what do you look for in leaders around you as well?
And then, are you the trusted leader that you need to be? How do you build that trust with the leaders that you consult with as well?
The second trait in terms of trusted leadership is about the ability to articulate the vision. So that visionary leader, what does that mean and what does that look like? And you've got a great analogy here, haven't you, Priya?
Well, what I always say is, so much of what we do as internal communication professionals, and our opportunity is in creating the connections for the employees and the audiences that we're talking to. And, you know, we connect words to actions, values to behaviors, strategies to results, and brand promises to those employee experiences and customer experiences. That's the power. That's where I say the magic happens, in terms of bringing those words on a wall. You know, the words in the report that was the novel that was, you know, sent out at the beginning of the year, and some people may not even open again. How do we bring those words to life in a way through those behaviors? And ideally, when we do our jobs right, we impact the results of the organization. We are, like, internal communication is integral to business outcomes, to organizations being successful, and being able to connect that and help your leaders articulate that vision. And then when you're consulting with leaders, to make those connections so that they know that you know what's going on, you know what's important, and that in some cases, articulating those visions to your leaders is telling them when things are not connected, when there's a disconnect with those actions and those words. So that, you know, coming back to the trust conversation, right, Advita, that when we have those disconnects versus those connections, we actually lead to the distrust versus the trust.
We do. And we are, you know, as communication professionals, we are good at working with our leaders to help them articulate their vision. And we should be, you know, what is that story? You know, Priya and I have worked with CEOs who are frustrated at their teams and organization and employees not understanding the direction that they want to go in. And that is critical, and we can help them solve that. But to Priya's point, we also hear the frustration from internal communication professionals who feel that they are not being used in the right way, and leaders are not bringing them in terms of their contribution that we can make as value-added, trusted advisors. So I always encourage folks to look at, how are you articulating the way you want to show what your team is about? Yeah. How are you articulating the vision of internal comms?
One of the things I'm curious about, Advita, is that I've noticed here in Canada, which is where I'm located, that most of the time when I'm brought into an organization for that strategic work, it's often not the communication professional who's hiring me. It's human resources and it's leadership. And that concerns me, quite honestly, that I can sometimes be brought into a project and internal communication and communication in general is not around the table. And I always make the point of bringing internal communication to the table, but that's a concern. That's a real area of that disconnect with leaders when we're not actually being brought to those tables in order to create those connections. And do you see the same thing?
Yeah, 100%. And this is where again, we, going back to that, if they don't trust you, they don't hear you. And this is why we talk about what is missing in your trust, say, do gap. Is it the fact you're not being able to articulate the vision of what you're trying to achieve for the organization? Is it because they don't see you as the credible professional that they hired you for, and you've gone down a route of maybe delivering something that doesn't deliver against their business outcomes? And it's really important to really think deeply about what is happening here, where we're not having that connection with our leadership team and with the work that we're doing. There's a few comments in the chat, Priya, so I'm just going to go to that.
Yeah. So Zane asked a question that it's interesting that there's so much trust in executive leadership. What does that look like in organizations where employees couldn't even pick out the CEO out of the lineup? That would be a concern for me. I remember working with an organization years ago where they actually would say a new CEO had been brought in, a new president had been brought in, and it was about 6 months into his leadership, and I was doing internal communication audits in the organization as a new person hired, and people would say, "David who?" And that was something that we needed to fix. By the time we finished with him, because of a merger and acquisition, we had been acquired. He got a promotion, of course, but he ended up being recognized nationally as a key leader. And he was so respected and so well known. It's part of our job. We need to create the visibility. We need to help them create that trust.
Yeah. And the challenge also is that a lot of those leaders, and we've seen this time and time again, those leaders who make the effort, the CEOs, to work on their visibility plan, and it's an intentional effort that you have to do. And as communication professionals, it's our role to guide them and influence them to be able to do that well. And if you're hearing from your colleagues that they don't know who the CEO is and they can't pick them up from a lineup, then some work needs to be done and some trust needs to be built between you and them. Or whoever your leader is in managing that relationship with the CEO, and going back and understanding where the gaps are in that visibility and why that's important. And what will happen slowly, and I've seen this happen time and time again, is that when crisis takes place and a change has happened, or you're going through a restructure and you need people to be aligned with the vision that the CEO is trying to represent, people will disengage. And there'll be disengagement, there'll be distraction, productivity is low, people are looking elsewhere for jobs, loyalty has gone, and the impact is real. And when we talk about leaders who are not keen to be more visible, we have to talk about the consequences of that action. That right now, everything might seem great and everything's going well, fine, you may not need to have that visibility. However, when crisis does hit and things are going wrong and you need everyone to align, is going to be problems, and that's the consequences of what's going to happen. So let's figure out what works for you, what's comfortable for you. Are you a person that wants to present in front of thousands of people, or are you somebody that prefers smaller groups, or or do you want to delegate that responsibility and be quite clear that these individuals are going to be supporting some of the messaging out there? But you've got to have those conversations, because I think in the trust barometer, when people talk about who do they trust and talk about leaders, it's very highly dependent on who they regard as leaders. And depending on the level that you're in, you're probably talking about a couple of tiers above you, personally, on that. When you work in a massive organization with 20, 30, 40,000 employees, the trust is generally within that division. And the CEO isn't as visible as it needs to be. For smaller organizations, it's a different case.
And remember, there are different personalities. So Zane's talking about the fact that there may be leaders who don't want to be visible. Chances are they don't want to, it's not necessarily they don't want to be visible. They're busy. They may be introverts. I've worked with a lot of introvert leaders. It's how do you create those moments, and how do you create that visibility on their terms, so that they are appearing there. There's those moments that matter that you're helping create in a way that's comfortable for them. Every leader is different, but that's how you create trust as well, is understanding that leader, understanding their pain points, understanding what they need.
Exactly. And then we said, and again, it's about curiosity, asking those curious questions, encouraging a discussion. It's the only way you can break down those boundaries that you may be put in place. cultivating that change and helping people feel included is a big part of that visionary leader. And what role do we play as professionals in that space, especially communication professionals, in helping our leader shine and lead with assertiveness where possible, but also confidence and a bit of humility alongside that as well. Influence. I mean, there's some chats going on around influence, leadership, and negotiating. And one of the things that Priya and I have spoken about a lot with the people that we work with and in our previous organizations is how, as individuals, do we influence and negotiate with the leaders that we're supporting, and how do we make sure that they're coming along with us when we're trying to persuade them to give us that seat around that table. And I want to share a quote by Mike Klein. So those of you who don't know Mike Klein, he is a great communications consultant, but also does We Lead Comms, where he shares profiles of communication professionals who are doing great work in our industry. And Mike was at an event with me last week in London, and he said, we need to stop thinking about the seat at the table because we already have a hand on the steering wheel. And that resonated so much, and that's about influence. So how much influence do we actually have in that organization that we're supporting, and how often are people listening to what we're saying, and how can we help drive the conversation in the direction that we need it to go in order for our colleagues to do their good work to deliver against the objectives of that business. And should we stop talking about this seat around the table, because it's been a conversation that's been around for a very long time? What do you think, Priya?
You know what? I've always had the seat at the table, right? So, and part of
Look
that,
at you.
I have, you know, whether it was inside organizations or whether it was as a consultant sitting around those executive tables, having conversations with leaders, there is power there, but there's also power in knowing how to drive the bus, right? I do agree with that driver, the wheel on the bus analogy, because it is powerful. Like what we're able to do, being able to see the advice that we're providing come out of the mouths of the leaders and managers in a way that actually influences behaviors is, again, I always call it magic. It's powerful, and the more relevant and the more they need you at that table, the more you're going to be invited to it. Yeah. If you're actually driving the bus, you're going to be there, asked questions, asked for your advice, you know, all the time. And what we always say with internal communication practitioners and professionals is that the issue here is not capability and capacity, it's courage and confidence. Right? It usually is being able to be there influencing is about your courageousness to say yes or no. No is almost more important than yes sometimes. Yeah. It's your courage and confidence to be able to provide the advice, knowing how employees are going to be reacting and how they're going to be influenced. It's your knowledge and your business acumen and understanding what makes those leaders tick, and also how your employees are going to react to it. It's that expertise, and you have to believe in that in order to deliver it.
You do. But if you haven't been as privileged or lucky as Priya to have that seat around the table, I haven't, I admit it. Here's some tactics that I have deployed that have got me an invitation in the room at the very least. And one story I will share with you was there was a director who I worked with who would not give me the time of day. Honestly, I walked into the room, he walked out. I contributed to a conversation, he ignored it. And I was lost at what to do. And he just didn't respect comms in the way that to be fair, he didn't respect comms, full stop. So one day, after a few weeks of frustration, one day the HR business partner invited me into a leadership meeting to help her present the engagement results back. I walked in the room, again, I was ignored. And then he started to share a story about a radio interview with somebody that he really admired. And then when I went back to my office, so he did his story, everyone listened with graciousness, but didn't really contribute. And then they moved on to the next agenda item. And I saw he was a bit deflated, that no one felt as excited as he did. So when I went back to my office, I Googled the latest article of this individual that he was speaking about so fondly, and emailed it to him and said, I thought you might find this quite interesting. Didn't hear anything back from him. Didn't let it deter me. So a week later, I was walking past a bookshop, and I saw a book by the person he mentioned, and I left a little note on a piece of card and put it on his desk and said, I don't know if you've already got this copy, but I thought you might enjoy the read based on what you shared. Half an hour later, he's at my door with the book, and he said, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The next day, I had an email from his PA inviting me to all the leadership meetings, and our relationship turned. And he said to me a few months later, nobody has ever listened to me to that level and has actually helped me be a better leader. And I really appreciate what you did for me then. And from that point on, I realized that at the end of the day, the leaders that we work with are human beings. They may feel quite distracted and quite distant and quite aloof and a bit cold. But when we really listen to what they're saying and we start influencing in the way we need to, sending them a book and sending them an article and listening to what they're saying can make a massive difference. And my perception of C-suite leaders specifically at that time changed. And all I did was listen to what he was saying and pay attention and relate back to him. And that built trust. It also helped me influence in the right way. So he always came to me if there was a challenge or a conversation to ask me what my thinking was. And he used to say, come on, Advita, let's walk and talk. I want to hear from you. And I remember the press manager saying to me, how on earth did you get him from ignoring you in a room to now being almost your best friend? And I said, this is where we come in with our empathy and the way we support individuals. So something to really think about. If you're struggling with your leadership, what is it about them that you can really tap into and influence in the right way?
And for me, I joke around, it's not executive management, it's ego management, right? Being able to understand what are their motivations? Are they concerned about what the competitor is doing or that next leader is doing down the road? They start paying attention. So when you can have that leader who is a relation, who can bring you into a room, and that you can help that leader be successful, then more other leaders want more of that. So they're trying to find out how, and they realize you're the person in the room, and that helps as well.
Definitely. So Chris Lee has said, getting a seat at the table means being seen as more than an expert at communications. It means understanding how effective comms yields meaningful outcomes. 100%. And then Lexi has said, people pleasers struggle with this sometimes. We don't want to win the award for the biggest pusher backer around, but I'm always heard when I can listen to what they want and back up my recommendations with data.
Absolutely.
We are
measurements.
Measurement data fans, Lexi. What is our secret weapon? If you are struggling to influence in the workplace, data, evidence, get that as much as you can. It will make
connected to outcomes and organizational impact.
Yeah, and the object. So everything. So we always say that you're a business leader with communication expertise. So put yourself in a business leader mindset with your specialism in communication and look at what the business needs. And I always say to folks, don't talk about communications, talk about business. So another little quote from our book to say how we communicate with others is beyond the workplace. It's often our friends and family who significantly influence our language and words. And that's an important thing around the people that you surround yourself with. How are they talking about communications? How are they talking about the work that you're doing? And how are they talking about you when you're presenting yourself in front of your leadership team? Managing expectations, Priya, a big one.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that's interesting is I believe with changing demographics and a changing world, the expectations people have for leaders is changing. It's there used to be this hierarchical top-down way we did things, and now it's about include us and listen to us and hear us and then respond. And it's really about having that closed loop process. We're seeing a real change in a leader or employees and audiences in general, publics, communities who are expecting leaders to be relatable. They're expecting leaders to be real and authentic and transparent, and they're expecting leaders to be representative, which is there's work that needs to be done from that perspective, and so it's when those expectations are not met, when people don't see leaders like them, when we don't see leaders like us, there's a disconnect that we need to close the gap on.
Jenny Field has recently just written a book around leadership and the 8 traits of credibility, which is well worth the read, by the way. So it's Nobody Believes You. It's a striking title, and it's a really good book. And she talks about parts of what makes a great leader, and some of that is around that realism, representation, and making sure that we are being in that community and having those conversations. Nobody really wants to be led by a dictator anymore. Nobody wants to be led by somebody who, do as I say, not as I do type of personality. Brené Brown, those of you who don't know Brené Brown, is a sociologist, researcher, an incredible person who talks about vulnerability. So vulnerability plays an important part of who we are and what we stand for, and how we manage the work around us, and how we make sure that people lean in to who we are and what we're about. And I think that kind of hierarchical model that you spoke about, Priya, is definitely not going to be the future of the modern workplace. And it'll be interesting to see what other people think.
Nobody Believes You is the name of the book on leadership, Lauren.
Nobody Believes You. Yes. Nobody.
And it's in our download that if you take a look at that. And thank you, Rachel.
Kimberly just said an autographed copy from Jenny. It's a great book, and I am biased. She's one of my best friends, but she has done an incredible job with this book, and it's such a good read. So please do check it out. So research shows, we talked about vulnerability. Research shows that when leaders show vulnerability, the impact on the team can be powerful. Leaders are more influential. It can help build connections and elevate performance. I mean, Priya and I don't need to share with some of you folks on here that when leaders feel connection and they lead with authenticity, and they lead with credibility, and they lead with trust, things can change in the workplace and performance will be out there. And then relevance of role. So let's talk about the 2-letter word that seems to pop up, and it's the theme of this conference as well, AI. And AI is definitely shaking things up in the world of communications. And the research and the work that I do around this space has demonstrated that our role as an internal communication professionals will change, and is changing, with AI now becoming more mainstream. And the relevance of what we do will start changing, and we need to understand what that means and what that looks like, so if you want to continue to be leaders in the profession and keep the industry thriving as well.
And like you've heard so far in this conference, I think AI is an opportunity to get rid of the tactical work that that you can do a lot faster, so that you can focus on that strategic and advising work that's going to give you the credibility and make you seen as an expert and leader who is guiding the strategy versus somebody who's making it look pretty, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, interestingly, and I'll be really curious to hear from the folks listening. I spoke to a couple of people today during some of my meetings, and they said that they felt really uncomfortable and almost like they were cheating by using AI to help them form content ideas or headlines and write copy. And I'm really curious, because do you feel like it's cheating, Priya? Just to ask that question, if you use AI to help you with content, is it cheating?
Absolutely not. It's been fascinating to watch the kids, right? How they use AI in a way that they won't, get blamed for plagiarism in the school place, but they use it very, very strategically to help with the grammar, help with the spelling, help with the structure. It's all the stuff that your executives sometimes are asking you for, and they know how to use it, but they make sure it's their own and it's their thinking, and that's been really fascinating.
It's really interesting. They said it's like using a calculator. Like when calculators first came out, I'm pretty certain a similar conversation may have happened. Is it cheating? Am I cheating using a calculator? And I remember my maths teacher saying to me when I questioned why we have to learn mental arithmetic, and he's like, it's not like you're going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket all day. How wrong was he? with our mobile phones. I mean, we're all walking around with calculators.
I like that analogy. I'm starting to look at questions too, because we've been given the hook 3 minutes left.
Oh, wow. Let's get into questions. Right. Let's start sharing. So a previous session spoke about employee personas. With a large organization with different employees and perspectives on what builds trust, how can we get to everyone when it comes to that?
Well, absolutely. First of all, being able to negotiate some of the technology and tools, right? If we're afraid of AI that is, relatively cost effective right now, we can't bring in having the negotiations about the tools that are going to make our jobs easier so that we can actually get the metrics and measurement, and we can actually target information. We've been talking for years about customization and personalization. So if you start with personas and know what those buckets look like, and then actually have data and Active Directories, most of us use Microsoft, that will help us target the information so that it's relevant and useful to the people who receive it, the right information at the right time to the right people to do the right things, right? Really focused on that. I think that using the technology in order to drive that personalization and customization is a huge opportunity.
And also think about, do you have to get to everybody? If you're looking at the data and the teams are doing really good work and delivering against their objectives and performance is great, communication is great between line management and the team, do you need to get involved? Or should you just focus on the teams that need that energy and that support from you? And that sometimes we have this feeling that we have to touch every single person in the organization. But if things are going well and the data is showing that things are going well, then maybe you don't need to get involved with everybody and focus on the teams that need that support from you. And that's making it more personalized and more real as well.
And focus less on the outputs and the outtakes versus the actual outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. Crystal has said, is there any way to rebuild trust if trust has been lost, whether it's something you did or not? Yes, Crystal, there is a way to rebuild trust, but it takes a while. And you have to be consistent. You have to stay reliable. You have to demonstrate the fact, show integrity across all of this. And also, Priya and I talk about our 4 A's. You have to acknowledge where the mistakes have been made. And you have to make sure that people understand that you did get it wrong. Failure is not something is if it'll happen, it's when it will happen. And when you do fail, sometimes trust will be broken. But it can be rebuilt, but it will take time and patience. And you have to show a little bit of vulnerability and show that you're willing to help them rebuild that trust again. And they have to show that through credibility, reliability, and intimacy, relationships.
Yeah, and time is important here. You can't acknowledge and apologize months later when you need them for something. It needs to be pretty quickly.
Yeah. It does take time and energy, and this is why it's so critical to get a handle on trust before you break that trust, because it's easier to build trust when there's nothing there than it is to rebuild when you have caused some distrust and mistrust. And it's important to look for those symptoms as well. So you might see red flags pop up where people are not asking the questions and not collaborating and not volunteering. It's silence when you're introducing a change program, for example, or when you're asking for innovative ideas, no one's really saying anything. That's normally a signal or a sign that something is not quite right in there.
Absolutely. We are out of time. Do you want to put up our last slide, Advita,
yes.
just to remind
So
people?
we have shared sorry, let me just quickly. We have shared codes on here, so you will get everything that we've spoken about in detail. So the free resources there, it's all yours. There's books that we've mentioned, the podcasts that we've spoken about, and some top tips for you to share. And obviously, if you want to dig a bit deeper in trust and leadership and what that means for culture overall, then please do invest in our book. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for that thought-provoking session, Priya and Advita.
You need that Diet Coke?
I know.
You need that Diet Coke right now. I think so.
I need coffee. Once again, you'll see a poll in the polls section popping up, and we'll give you 30 seconds to share your feedback now. In the meantime, what's coming up is a Q&A session with a true expert on activating human-centric employee experiences. So if you have any questions on how to improve or enhance employee experiences at your organization, now's your chance.
For our next session, please welcome Preston Lewis, founder and CEO of Intactic, who's been navigating the comms world and adding value to many over 10 years now. For 10 years, Grace McClure, head of content at ContactMonkey, will be moderating this session to get you started.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.